All right, so I think let's get started. So do we have any questions before we get started, or we want to get started with the actual session? I hope everybody is able to hear me loud and clear. Okay, yeah, sure. I'm also looking forward to a very fruitful session, Gopal Krishnan. So any other questions, anybody wants to ask anything or discuss anything? So to get started, I have a question for all of you. Do you know what is information mapping? And what you can do is you can use the chat window to answer my questions. All right, so let me once again repeat. My question was very simple. Question is, what is information mapping? Has anybody heard this term earlier? And if yes, where have you heard this term? Have you used the principles of information mapping earlier? And I hope you are all able to hear me loud and clear. I don't see any answers coming from your side on the chat. All right, I don't see anybody answering my question here. Are you able to see my chat messages? I've sent you a message through chat. I've actually sent you a link through chat. Window. All right, can you see the link now? So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and click on that link, and you'll see a 2-page Word file. So I want you to download that file, and you can use the chat window to ask me questions during the session, or maybe you can sort of put them on hold till the end of the session. Okay, terrific. So I think all of you are downloading that page now. So I have shared it through my Google Drive. So I think it's available there. So you can just go and download that. Now at the end of this session, I'll also give you the link of the answer. So the answer to this particular question. All right. So I have a reply from Dharitri, who's saying that never heard of information mapping. She has heard of it in a different context, though. All right. So I think you are able to see my slide now. So I have put a slide on the screen share now. So in this session, we are going to talk about information mapping and its principle, and how they can be used in day-to-day life. Now, of course, they can also be used in technical writing. So I'll just go ahead with the session. I think we have waited for a long time. I see that we have about 16 attendees now. And so information mapping and its principles, feel free to send your message through the chat. So I'm monitoring the chat as we speak, and I'll be able to answer your questions either directly during the session, or maybe we can take it, we can try and answer them at the end of the session. So information mapping and its principles. So the concept of information mapping is what we are going to cover. It's a very brief presentation, and I'd like to keep the presentation short and maybe take some questions and answers at the end of the session. So information mapping is essentially a research-based method. It talks about analyzing, organizing, and presenting information. Now, information mapping, or the principles of information mapping, were developed by Robert Horn a few years ago. And he said that if information is not properly structured, if it is not properly presented, then the importance of the content may be lost. And he said the organization of the information should be on the basis of the audience need. It should be based on the purpose of information, and that will make your communication easier and effective. So this is a sample document that you can see. Now, this is not the same document that I have given as an exercise. That's a different document altogether. But this is just a simple sample document that you can see. And in this document, you can probably see a number of paragraphs which are just put together, and looks like nothing but a wall of text. And this is before applying the principles of information mapping. And if you apply the principles of information mapping, then this is what you should get. So it would look something like this. So you see that there is a heading there, and you see that there are different paragraphs there. I would like to invite you to comment on this. So look at the previous slide again and look at this slide again and tell me what is the difference between the two. So obviously you see some headings there, but then what else do you see? So I want you to put your replies in the chat window, and we'll look at 4 or 5 replies and then move on from there. So once again, a question for you. What is the difference between this and this as it's visible to you right now? So Varsha is saying that it's more organized on the second slide. Alpana is also saying it's more organized, but then she's adding that because of that added organization, it's easy to find information. Saili is saying that the clarity is enhanced in the second slide and hence it could be more useful. Vidya is saying that now there is a structure to the content. So probably that's making the content more accessible. So Alpana is saying that user can pick up the information that he or she wants, and he or she can do that pretty easily. All right, so the document is better formatted. Titles are making the information more accessible and also searchable. That's a very interesting point, Amrapali. So Harish is saying that the second document is formatted, whereas the earlier document probably seemed like raw text. Is this what you wanted to say, Harish? Yes, excellent. So if we try to analyze this second slide now and we try to look at what is that has been done. So obviously this has not happened by accident. So there are some careful decisions which have been taken while moving from the earlier slide to this slide. And those are the principles of information mapping that you can use. Now, the principles of information mapping can be used anywhere across any document. They are not restricted to technical writing. You can probably use it in creative writing. You can probably use it in reports. You can probably use it in email communication. You can use it to maybe design brochures or manuals or release notes or install guides. So these are not really restricted by any particular type of document, but then some of them, if developed properly, will actually lead you to a good document template itself. So let's go ahead and look at the actual principles. So the number of principles information mapping. So 7 key principles that I have found. It's very important to mention here that the slides that I have presented here were prepared by one of my colleague when we are preparing some training material. And for doing this, we have actually put together information from internet. So the information that I'm sharing with you right now is not copyright of TechnoRights, and it is in fact put together from a lot of sources on internet. Yes, we have tried to put it together in a meaningful exercise, so it's a little bit better structured than what you'll find on internet. But then I don't owe copyright to this particular content, and a lot of it is actually also there on Wikipedia itself. So here are the principles of information mapping. So you see the 7 key principles. So number 1 is chunking the content. Number 2 is deciding the hierarchy and the order of chunking that you are going to do. Number 3 is sort the content by the relevance of the content. Number 4 is label the content by giving headings. And of course, these headings will depend on the relevance and the chunking that you have done. Number 5th is make the details of the information accessible to the reader. Number 6 is try to integrate a graphic or a table or a diagram or a chart. Now, the information that I got from the net, this point was simply written as include an integrated graphic. And I have changed that to graphic or table or diagram or chart. And we'll talk about each of these points as we go ahead. 7th and the final point is ensure the consistency of presentation. So let's go ahead to the next slide. So this is our first principle, which is chunk information. So as we have seen in the very first document, it was simply looking like wall of text, but then obviously information was available there. We have not sourced any separate information when we have created this, but then we have tried to identify blocks of information within that wall, and we have tried to chunk it. So we have tried to identify a couple of sentences, and we have given them a label as background. We have tried to make a bulleted list, and we are calling it as a policy. Or then we have found a couple of important sentences, and we have called them out as definitions. Furthermore, there is example and there is consequence. So here again, so the first principle of information is information chunking, which is divide the information into smaller and manageable units. Second is the hierarchy and the order of chunking. So obviously, I'm not putting the consequences first. So you can see that logically the background can come first, then maybe the policy, then maybe the definition. Now you can obviously change sequence here a little bit. So instead of policy, maybe you can put the definition earlier, and then maybe you can put a policy, and then maybe examples, and then consequences. Or again, you can change the position of examples and consequences. Maybe put the consequences first and then example. But the point here is, after you have done chunking, then you decide the sequence. And as you can see now, if we are talking about 6 chunks here, so background, policy, definition, example, and consequences. So these are 5 chunks. And these 5 chunks are appearing below the 6th one, which is the title of the document. So you have got 6 headings here, and then 5 headings are inside those 6. So the point here is, after you have identified the chunks, then also try to identify the hierarchy of those chunks. Then put the relevant content in the relevant heading. So obviously you'll have to look at that chunk and give it a suitable title. And obviously this is something that will probably happen automatically if the document is fairly simple, or then otherwise it may actually happen after 1 or 2 rounds of corrections. So maybe a better structure will emerge after you have worked on the exercise for some time. So try to give relevant titles. Try and make sure that one chunk contains only one type of information, and that's why any confusion can be avoided. So don't try to combine the chunks together. So just try to keep them separate, keep them modular. Labeling the content, so come up with suitable labels. So once again, related to hierarchy, your hierarchy is probably going to directly affect your labels. So if you label them properly, then it becomes easy to search, as we had discussed. It becomes easy to read, and maybe it's easier to use later on as well. Make the information accessible in layers. So within the chunk, maybe you can have further layers. So for example, you can see that under definition chunk, there is a layer provided for reference. Or under the policy chunk, we have further got a bulleted list there. Or under the consequences chunk, you can see that we have got a table inserted over there. So the table is also helping me to organize the information in different levels. Furthermore, further down in the higher level hierarchy, the bulleted list is also allowing me to do that. So put the information in chunks, and within the chunks, put it into layers. And then ensure consistency of information. Make sure that it's easier to read and understand. Try to use similar words for numbers, text, names, units of measurements, and so on. And then include an integrated graphic. So wherever possible, try to include a picture, or maybe try to include a table, or try to include a chart, or maybe you can draw a diagram, something like a flow chart, and so on. So 7 very simple principles of information mapping. I see that we have got some messages on chat as well as some questions. All right, so Harish is asking, is making details accessible similar to giving the source of information? So making the details accessible is not same as giving the source of information. Source of information is probably related to giving references or citations. So I may explain to you a lot of things, but I may not tell you the source. So for example, in this presentation, I could have said that, oh yes, I I've prepared this presentation based on my own knowledge of technical writing over the last so many years and so on. But then I'm making the details available to you, but then I'm not disclosing the source. But what I did on the contrary is I said that this is the information and this is where I have sourced it from. So giving the source is a part of the information, and that's your policy decision whether you are going to include it or not. I see some questions also being asked. All right, so two more relevant questions here in the questions window. So how will we make the details accessible to readers? So number one, you chunk them. Number two, you organize them in a hierarchy. Number three, you give them a title, and that should make the details accessible to readers. Should a table do? Should a label to the chunk be given before the paragraph or after it? I think it should be before it, because it sort of tells you what's going to be there in the paragraph that's going to precede it. And then based on that, your mind decides whether you want to read that paragraph or not. So you may just read the heading and you may say, oh, yes, this is important and I want to read this. Or you may say that I'm not interested in the definition, maybe let's skip on to the example. Now, it's important to note that whatever I have put here, now I have put it in a very simple one-page format. In a real life, your information may not always be restricted to one page. So maybe you are talking about 5 pages, maybe you're talking about 15 pages and so on. Now, many of the points that are covered in information mapping, we are already doing. So for example, we are so used to giving headings inside a business report. So I think almost intuitively we give headings like background, or we give information like results, or we give recommendations, or we give description and so on. So I think some of these things are actually intuitive, and we are probably doing them as it is. Just that the principles of information mapping are sort of very clearly identifying them from each other. And then after you have done any job, you can just go back to the list of principles, and you can think whether I have used all of them optimally in my job or not. And if not, then what's that I can do about it, right? So I think this is probably the last slide in my presentation. Yeah. So this is the last slide. So here we are talking about document. So as you can see, the name of the document, and within that there are multiple sections, as you can see. Within those sections there are blocks, and within the block again you'll have text, and you may have the integrated graphic and so on. So each of them is a chunk. So for example, a block is a chunk. If you put multiple blocks together, you get a section, and at that level you can say the section is also a chunk. And when you put all the sections together, then you actually get the document. So in this slide I have just tried to depict a hierarchy of information, and depending on how complex your document is, this may actually go into further details. So within the block you'll probably have bulleted list, or you'll probably have numbered list, or you may have tables, or again within the table you may have a bulleted list or a numbered list, and so on and so forth. So I think that sort of brings me to the end of this particular presentation. So what I'll do is I'll just go to the list of principles once again. So chunking the content, deciding the hierarchy, relevance of the content, labeling the content, making sure the details are accessible by putting them into layers, integrating graphic, and ensuring uniformity of presentation. Incidentally, we also call that as parallelism in technical writing. So what I want you to do now is I have given you the link, so I expect you to download that Word file, and I'll give you something like 10 minutes to reorganize it in Word. You can also do it in any other file. So for example, OpenOffice or anything else, you can do that. And then after 10 minutes, let's see what you have been able to put together, how well you are able to organize that information. So I see some questions on chat, and I try to answer them. So the link was pasted in the chat window, and here it is once again. So Saili says she is not able to download the file. Is that the case with everybody else? None of you is able to download the file? Hello? Okay, I'll give you one more link. Maybe you try that. Can you try this link? Amrapali, I understand you'll not be able to work on this exercise on a smartphone. Yes. But were you able to participate through the session? I mean, in the session using your smartphone? This is the first time we are using this tool for a webinar, and that's the reason I kept my presentation very short and simple. So next time, I promise we'll probably go in for a longer session. All right, guys. So you can tell me if you are able to download the exercise. In the meantime, I'll also open the exercise here. All right. So I see that some of them are able to download the exercise. Rest of you can, maybe you can send me a mail and I'll send you the exercise as a mail attachment. What error are you getting when you are trying to download? Alpana or Saili, are you getting an error when you are trying to download? Oh, the site is nothing but my Google Drive location. So I'm wondering if Google is down. I see that Harish is able to download it, and Varsha was also able to download it. So probably that site is being blocked by something at your end. Now what I'll do is that exercise was nothing but pure text which was not even formatted. So I try to paste it here. And all that you have to do is paste all these chunks together in one Word file and try to work on them. All right, so here we go. So what I've done is I have put all the information and I've pasted it in the chat window. And that's really all of it. So it's just a 1.5 page file. So all that you have to do is you can copy paste this from the chat window here and maybe put it in a Word file and just create 1 or 1.5 page document out of it, and then try to apply the principles of information mapping. In the meantime, if you have any questions, I can take them. So let's see if you have any more questions. So the question is, how is information mapping used in technical writing or in any field in general? So if you look at the various elements that we use in technical writing, then I think we are automatically using the principles of information mapping. So if you look at the way we give headings to our procedures, then I think that is chunking. Or when we are explaining something related to concepts, then we are using chunking again. If you look at the way we put information into table, then obviously we are giving an integrated graphic. When we insert a screenshot, so let's say I'm talking about a software application, and for the reference of the user, I'm giving a screenshot, then I think it's nothing but an integrated graphic. Or I may actually have inserted an engineering drawing in place of a screenshot, or I may have also inserted, let's say, something like a flow chart, and that again becomes an integrated graphic. We have talked about, and I think all of you are probably aware of topic-based authoring. So in topic-based authoring, we talk about concept, task, and a reference. So there again, I see a direct link of information mapping. So we have got three types of topics, and one of the principles of information mapping is don't mix different types of contents together. And in topic-based authoring, that's what we do. So when we are explaining a concept, we don't explain the procedure. Or when we are explaining the procedure, we don't give the reference links. So concept, task, and a reference are different types of topics, and they are used to put together the document. And the document actually gets developed as different headings which are put together under blocks or under sections, and then those sections come together to make a chapter, and the chapters come together to make a document. So I think the principles of concept mapping are automatically integrated in technical writing. Next question is, sorting the content affect the weightage of the information? Are there thumb rules to avoid it? I'm not sure if I'm getting your question, Dharitri. Sorting the content will not affect the weightage, I would say. But I mean, my question is, are you trying to tell me that you are going to have information with very less of relevance? In that case, I think that information should be eliminated altogether. And we also talked about the sequence. So where we said that what is most important should come earlier, and then maybe in the order of importance, right? So the critical will come first, important will come later, nice to know will probably come at the end, right? So the thumb rules are, of course, what we call as the pyramid writing technique. And I think you are a student of our course, so if you go through the session where we are talking about the writing process, so therein the pyramid writing technique has been mentioned. Manisha is asking a question: in the course of information mapping, is it acceptable to remove certain content, or should the author retain every sentence from the raw data provided? I think if you look at the information mapping principles and the very first slide that we talked about, so let me just go back to that slide. So Manisha, if you look at this particular slide, so remember what we are saying here is analyze the information, organize the information, and then present the information. So information mapping is a careful three-step process. It's not an ad hoc process of giving certain labels and organizing it in whatever way it's organized in the source document. So for example, your original source may have sequence of A, B, C, D, E, and after applying the principles of information mapping, maybe instead of A, E will now come first, and A will probably go to the end, or the sequence may change. And the keyword here is on the basis of audience need and on the basis of purpose of the information. So these are 2 points that will sort of give you the sense of direction for organizing the information. So you'll have to organize it on the basis of audience's need. So if the audience needs minimum information and in the smallest time available, then obviously you are going to use a smaller chunk of information. If you are going to give long information which may be used only as a reference, then you are probably going to write a very long book. And maybe I can give you an example here. So I had read a book called as Microsoft Windows for Busy People, and the title of the book was something like Learn Microsoft Windows in 24 hours, and it was designed for busy people. Then I also read a document. Well, I did not read it cover to cover, but I have seen it. And this document said that Windows Complete API Reference Guide. And this document actually had 2 or 3 volumes. And each of those volumes was close to about 800 pages. So here we are actually talking about 2,400 or more pages of information. And in the first case, we are talking about learning Microsoft Windows in 24 hours. Now, obviously, these two documents are were written for two different types of readers or users. So we are talking about keeping in mind the audience's need. So in first case, I think the book is going to be read by somebody like me, who's a busy person and who doesn't have to read the API reference. I'm not going to develop any program that works on Windows. I just want to use Windows as a user, and perhaps I don't need to know, about even a single API. But then, if there is a programmer who's going to make use of those APIs, let's say to print a file or to export a file in some other format, or to connect to another computer, another application that that works through Windows, then maybe he needs to use the API reference. So it depends on you. So maybe your source document was, let's say, 50 pages, and you may come out with 2, 3, 4 different documents depending on different needs of the audience, different types of audience, and different purpose of information. So I think that should be the guideline. So we are not saying that whatever is there you have to carry it. If you think that audience doesn't need this kind of information, you can simply eliminate it. So I don't think I mean, the principles of information mapping says that you have to include everything. No, in fact, you after you apply the principles, you will realize that the document gets simplified. Now, a question from Alpana here is, can PowerPoint presentation be termed as mapped information? If the PowerPoint presentation is designed properly, Alpana, then definitely yes. Because as you know, in a PowerPoint presentation, we have got slides. So for every slide, if you call that as an information chunk, then we do give every slide a label, and many times we do integrate a graphic on the slide, or maybe if we are trying to do a comparison of data or something like that, then we try to use something like a table, so which can probably be termed as as an integrated graphic. So a number of times, of course, we include charts, we include graphs, we include diagrams, illustrations, and so on. So if it is designed properly, then yes. Having said that, I have also seen very bad PowerPoint presentations. I have seen presentations where there is text on the slide, but the slide doesn't have a heading. I have seen that there is a heading on the slide, but it appears only after you start clicking. Many times the text appears first, and after that the heading appears. Or in place of heading, you have simply said something like "continue," and you have not even mentioned, what the heading is. So in that case, I would call it as a bad PowerPoint presentation, and it would be a very bad example of information mapping as well. All right, so Harish is saying he has formatted that document. Harish, if you have got my mail ID, maybe you can send that document to me and we can share it here. So notes we get from coaching classes are information mapping of textbooks. Well, in the first place, the textbook itself should be a good example of information mapping. Why are we talking about notes of coaching classes? Notes of coaching classes generally is like a critical commentary of the textbook, and they tell you probably something that the textbook itself doesn't. So for example, maybe there was a lesson on history where we are talking about the Panipat War, the first Panipat War, or let's say the second Panipat War, and the textbook may just tell me the story of the war, whereas the commentary will be where the teacher has applied his brains, and then he's saying that, okay, so we can say that Muhammad Abdali started doing this is how he prepared his army, this is how the Marathas prepared their army, and what were the reasons for the loss of the Maratha army. So the history book itself, the story itself may not have organized information like this. So for example, it may not just tell you that, okay, here is a list of 7 bulleted points why the Maratha army lost the second Panipat war. So it may not do that. It may just tell you the story. But then the question that could be asked to you during the exam is, give the reasons for loss of the war by the Maratha warriors. And at that time, probably, so it's the teacher who's trying to answer the question that may be asked, and in interest of the student. So keeping in mind the student's requirement. So is it information mapping? I think so. Yes, why not? But let's not say that the original textbook itself is also not information mapping. So for example, if you look at some of the science textbooks, you'll see that the headings are very well organized. Typically, when they give you experiments to be done, so information is very well organized. They have the heading of the experiment. Then they say what apparatus or equipment you are going to need to do the experiment. Then they'll give you a brief of the experiment. After that, they'll give you the procedure of the experiment. And they'll even tell you that what is the conclusion you are likely to get. So for example, they may even show you a slide of, how the onion skin looks like when you see it through a microscope. So that kind of content, I think you can easily say that it is already information mapped. All 7 principles of information mapping are applied right there. Now, if you change the user type or if you change the purpose of the information, then maybe it can be reorganized a little bit. So if I decide to make, let's say, a brief of an experiment book, then I may just give the apparatus and I may just give the procedure. Or if I decide to analyze, the conclusions of the experiment, then I may organize that same information differently. But in my point of view, I think even science books are very good examples of principles of information mapping. In a history books, typically we don't write things like headings and bulleted list and so on. But then history is supposed to be read like a story. So I don't think a storybook will have too many headings. So for example, if you're reading a storybook, let's say if you're reading Ramayana, or if you're reading Alice in Wonderland, then it doesn't say following are the things that Alice liked in the Wonderland. So if they like it like that, it will probably become Alice in the Wonderland user manual and not the book. So the storytelling part of it will probably get hampered. So some of the books may not have that organization, but that's not true about all of them. And notes, I think yes, they definitely would be considered as principles of information mapping implemented. Anybody else has completed the document? Yeah. So when we learn a language, it is divided on the basis of 4 types of usage of language: reading, writing, listening, speaking. And the complexity increases as we go to the higher level. So can we say that it is based on this principle? It is based on chunking, definitely yes. But there it's not just the question. By the way, this question is from Rujuta Iyengar, and she is asking that can we say that the complexity increases as we go up? And can we say this is based on this principle? So whenever you are putting information in any document format, be it a PowerPoint presentation, be it a Word document, I think the principles of information mapping will automatically come into picture. You may have badly mapped information, yes, but then there is information map there, no doubt about it. Now, your question, Rujuta, is also related to what we call as instructional design. And the instructional design theory says that there are prerequisite skills which are required for learning the more complex skills. So, for example, a reading could be required for writing, or reading could be required for speaking, and so on. So, if we are talking about learning language, then I think the principles of instructional design will also come into picture. But somewhere they'll intersect. I mean, I see what you are saying. So somewhere they'll intersect. So if you go to, let's say, only one type of learning objective, then the lesson content of that objective will also have an information map within the lesson. Yeah, so I think in your subsequent comment, you You have sort of agreed to what I have said. Anybody else has been able to put that exercise together, and have you shared it with me? So let me just see if I have received any mails, and if I can open them here. Harish, your mail has not come in so far. All right, next question. Can a document with mapped information have additional relevant information than that of the source document, or should it be restricted to information in the source document? Now, Daritri, I think this probably depends on what is that you are trying to do. So, what we are saying is principle of information mapping should be used for creating a document that can be better understood by the target audience and that can fulfill the purpose. Now, for the sake of exercise, I have given you information in a ready-made document. In a real life, your information may not be in the ready-made document. So what I mean is, in real life, you may not get information like this. In real life, you may actually get information which is partially mapped, and then you may have to enhance that, or you may have to change the structure of that information and so on. So you may get some part of information which is already divided into chunks, or you may get some information which is probably not. So you'll probably need to undo some of that structure, and you'll probably need to redo that structure. And this happens as you go ahead. So information mapping is not about converting a documented from a wall of text into a nicely formatted document. Information mapping is coming up with a powerful information map or structure that will fulfill the purpose of the document. So it's not a document conversion, theory. Information mapping is not for document conversion. Information mapping is for document writing. Now, because we are doing this exercise and I wanted you to do something as a part of this particular session or webinar, that's why I have created this as an exercise where, it's probably looking like a document conversion. And I mean, my due apologies there. So it's not that. It's just that for the sake of the exercise, I'm giving you this text. In the real life, information mapping is the process of creating the map and putting your information there as you go ahead. It's not a conversion of a document. It's not, chopping the document into pieces and then organizing them on a board or something like that, and then putting post-its with their names. It's not that. So it's just the principles that I've used, and to explain the principles, I've used the ready-made document. So it's not a document conversion or structure conversion methodology, if I may use that word. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the answer to that exercise. So a question from Harish here is, so what I'll do is I'll just project the answer for you on the screen. And while you are looking at that, I'll probably read the questions and answers. All right, so I assume that you are able to see the answer here. And this is the answer to the question that I had just asked. So the question from Harish is, how can we avoid the reader losing the thread while reading a long chunk? Now, this could be a challenge, but the whole idea is your information should flow, or your meaning should flow through the content as if it's a thread passing through beads of a necklace. So one piece of information, if properly organized, should automatically lead to the second piece of information. And the learning has to be so so automatic and simple that at the end of reading it, the user should say, ah, that was simple, I could understand it. So the simplicity should be such that from the user's perspective, it shouldn't even seem like somebody had taken a lot of effort to make him understand. So now the user should actually feel that I just read it and I understood it. I think that's fine, that's cool. So he may actually think that it is his credit that he's able to understand it so easy. So how can you avoid? I think try and avoid long chunks of information. So don't put one long block. So put that, sort of divide that into more blocks. If there are lists, then make bulleted lists out of them. If there are options, make bulleted list out of them. If there are steps, make numbered lists out of them. If there is a relevant graphic, and if I go to the next page of this exercise that I'm sharing, you will see that. So here you'll see that now this information was not originally given. The text was given to you, but the illustration was not given to you, right? And what we have done is we have simply looked at the text, tried to understand that, and we have tried to see if we could get a relevant image from the net, and we have included that. So maybe include the illustrated graphics, images, charts, tables that are easy to read, that are easy to find information in, and that will probably capture the user's interest. In any case, I have realized that this is a bottom line of everything. The bottom line of everything is what is the motivation of the user to read. If the user has got enough motivation to read, so let's say he's going to get promoted after doing that reading, he's going to get certified after doing that reading, or he'll be able to do his work based on the information that he's reading, then his motivation is fairly high. If he's reading it as a time pass, then he's probably looking at more of entertainment than information. I see some more questions here, so let me go ahead and address them. So at the same time, on the left side, as you can see, I'm scrolling, and you can see the information chunks with the graphics. All right, so I think what Rujita has done is she has already worked on the document, and she's saying the information mapping in this document, the structure of the map is as follows, which is environmental issues, types of pollutions, causes, surveys, results, statistics, and chronology. Is that chronology? Yeah. Right. And so Rujita, as you can see here, I have got I've got the information right here. I mean, this is the answer to your questions, and you can see that it probably matches with what you have said, and it has gone down to a little bit one more level of detail. So, for example, there's a paragraph with the label introduction, and then there is a paragraph with the label history there. So you could have probably two attempts at it, and then maybe you'll be happy. If it's very long content, then you probably will need to have three or more attempts. As I said, this is the information map that you develop, and once that map has developed, then you probably will go and work and put your text into that. So as I said earlier, this is not text conversion. The exercise makes it look like that, but then yeah. I'm sorry, were you able to see that screen share or not? And are you able to see it this time? No, I think nobody was able to see that screen. So I've started the screen share again, and I hope you are able to read it this time. And if you want to download this, let me give you that link as well. So I've uploaded. So this is the link for downloading that answer. And this is the short link for downloading that same answer. So if you click on that link, it should download this PDF file, and then you should be able to read it and study it. So maybe what you can do is you can compare your answer with this PDF and see how you could have improved it. So to sum it up, what we talked about today was principles of information mapping. As I said, information mapping is probably not a new groundbreaking theory or something. It's rather something intuitive, which we already knew for years. We probably have been practicing information mapping principles without calling them as such, or without knowing that they are actually called as information mapping principles. At least that's what I realized when I started studying the theory. So it was put together by Professor Horn, and there are two criteria for information mapping. Number one is the audience's requirement, who's the audience. Number two is the purpose of the information, what purpose the information is going to serve. So if the audience changes or if the purpose changes, then your information map may change. And then it talked about a number of principles which included chunking, hierarchy, sequence of information, uniform form of expression, relieving the details in a layered systematic format. It's also called as a principle of progressive exposure. Exposure, I beg your pardon. And finally, we also talked about integrated graphic, which is including a graphic, a chart, a table, or something that makes the information more readable. So once again, information mapping is not a theory for converting documents from one format to other. It's rather developing a structure suitable to the audience's need and suitable to the information purpose. And once that structure evolves, then maybe you can use that structure to develop your document further. So as a part of this presentation, we conducted an exercise of about 10 minutes. So where I gave you one simple wall of text that probably included something like 11 paragraphs, and then I have shared with you the answer that will probably come up after you have applied the principles of information mapping. Needless to say here that this could just be one of the possible answers, and your answer is probably slightly different than this one. It may also be slightly better than this one, so there's nothing wrong there. So we are just saying that this is one of the ways of organizing information. Some of the questions that were asked during today's session were, can the information be removed as a part of information mapping? Yes, it can be removed if it is not required. because ultimately the goal is to organize everything in manageable chunks, and whatever is irrelevant, you can definitely take that out. If it is not relevant to the purpose of information, if it's not relevant to the audience, you can definitely take that out. One more question was, will information mapping, uh, can it be compared to notes that we get from coaching classes? So if they are written well, yes, they should be a good example of information mapping, though the person who has prepared the notes will never say this is done as per the information mapping principles. But then I even said that why just the notes? If you look at your science exercise book of any school, then you'll probably see that the principles of information mapping are already applied there as well. So depending on the content, your principles may change. So in storytelling, for example, we may not use, there is chunking happening in storytelling in any case. So if you go through the stories, you'll realize that it has got some identifiable chunks or patterns. So there are chunks there. In fact, in movie making also, if you look at it, there are different shots, and each of the shots can be seen as one particular chunk of screen angles and camera angles and so on to make it effective. So it has its own grammar. So there will be chunking in storybooks also. However, storybooks will probably not have things like tables. They'll probably not have bulleted list, numbered list, and so on. So there the idea is to tell you something based on which they want to see how much inferences you can draw. So the inferences may not be there for you ready-made in the bulleted list format. Then I was also asked a question about can the different layers of language learning be called information mapping? And my reply was yes, information mapping is applicable there as well. However, when we are talking about learning language, you also have to take into account the principles of instructional design. And that discussion is beyond the scope of our webinar today. So I'll probably not talk about that. But if you want me to talk about that, maybe we can take that up as a topic for one of the subsequent webinars.